Well, we are going to fly to the developed countries in Latin America, and we try to make an agenda at the end of the presentation looking was the authoritarian corporatist legacy and institutional design in a new context, because these are important things for our countries. My research questions are the following. How have the underlying authoritarian legacies in Latin America, especially those which shape collective rights, influenced the union capacity and trajectories now? What does this imply in terms of the opportunities to defend workers' interests through collective action in a global context? How we can explain institutional stability and change in these countries? My arguments are that variation in enforcement is useful to understanding both stability and change in weak institutional environments. Institutional designs influence associational powers of workers, as well as opportunities for autonomy, internal democracy, and accountability in unions, and that is very important for the quality of representation inside and outside of the enterprises. However, due to different designs and contexts, the authoritarian legacies may affect unions' trajectories in different ways. You can see the frame here, and you can see that the authoritarian legacies persist until now, and, but they can work in different ways, in defensive bunker way and effective straitjacket way. The cases of Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Mexico will serve to shed light on this question, given that they are countries where the authoritarian legacies still persist in legal designs and where trade unionism has played an important role all the history. Legacies' origin are different. Three of the countries, Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, were established from the inception of their labor regimes within the framework of state corporatist arrangements. This happened in an economic and political context in which governments sought the inclusion of workers as the principal motor of growth based on domestic market. On contrary, in Chile, this legacy was the result of the Pinochet regime. In contrast with the other three countries, unionism in Chile developed in a more independent manner. Chilean unionism was classist with greater margins of autonomy from the state. However, in practice, all four countries' power was concentrated at the leadership levels of organizations with a tendency to favor political negotiations with the state. The military dictatorship in Argentina and Brazil permitted union structure to remain unchanged and even allowed for internal elections. In Chile, the consequences of the coup d'etat for leaders and activists were even more severe than in the other countries. It was the only case of institutional breakdown in the labor world in our countries. The case of Mexico differs from the others, given that the political regime was stable through an extremely long period of 70 years. In this setting, the authoritarian labor model has greater long-term negative consequences than in other countries, consolidating into a rigid corporatism backed by employer organizations. In Argentina, Brazil, democratization was first than economic reform. The institutional legacies acted as a form of defensive bunker in which unions could shelter themselves first from the onslaught of anti-union policies during the military government, but also from those adopted within neoliberal economic models. Brazil's labor model imposed soft corporatism and was an exceptional case of renewal in the transition to democracy. The Argentina state corporatist labor model was more rigid than Brazil's. In both cases, authoritarian institutional legacies were an effective straitjacket. Even after the arrival of democracy, tempting down any attempt at union expansion and revitalization. They give more powers to employers than the others do. Since 2000, union trajectories have shown even greater divergences that in past decades reveal different capacities to organize and to win gains from the memberships. Institutional change and activation of all rules in both countries led to a significant rebound in unions' associational power. Labor policy became a priority, and therefore unions and collective bargaining gained prominence. This resulted in improved job quality and wages, as well as expanded social programs with corresponding reductions in poverty and inequality. Without changes in legislation nor policies, the opportunities to recover union power did not improve under the presidencies of Lagos and Bachelet, both from the Socialist Party. As such, the country's economic success was not accompanied by gains for all workers, but minimum wage improves. The case of Mexico is again distinct from the others. It is atypical and eccentric, as you can see soon. Firstly, lefty governments have not reached power. Secondly, unionists experience an extreme degradation in the context of a new manner of insertion into the global economy. Finally, the new economic model based on low wages turned out to be incompatible with authentic union representation, empowered with the resources that labor law ostensibly grants, but simultaneously impede, as we will soon state. Last reform, 2012, did almost nothing to change this situation. You can see, I don't have the time to show exactly the details, but Mexico is the worst situation. You can see, by example, earning participation on GDP. This is the situation of wages, and Mexico has the second place in labor productivity, but is nearly last place near than Nicaragua and Bolivia in the minimum wage. This graphic shows exactly how is Mexico. Is the blue color, the last one, and you see that is in the worst situation against the case of Argentina. Well, in the paper, I show different, all the differences, similarities, and semejances between both the four countries. But I think that one way to compare the distribution of power is by evaluating the implication that collective right compliance has for the employers in each of the four countries, evaluated on a scale of 1 to 5. In the paper are the details. Taking into account 5 key aspects of institutional designs. Through this exercise, we found that the highest value and therefore strongest collective rights belongs to Argentina, followed to Brazil, Chile, and Mexico. These results match with what we have seen before in relation to the trajectories and results in these countries. But it is even more useful to observe the values of each element, as it allows us to understand how, within each model, there are interactions which counteract or encourage collective rights. The example of Mexico shows this clearly. Mexico has formally the highest score, followed by Brazil in terms of associational power of workers, but it has a low score in terms of collective autonomy, shop floor level representation, and internal democracy. The strong associational power, which in theory would threaten employers, is offset in practice by the wide degree of control that the state and employers have in choosing with which union they will engage for collective bargaining. The institutional interaction shows that the labor model contains mechanisms which largely restrict associational power. However, the state has no power to resolve disputes unless the union leaders agree. This is the Achilles heel of the Mexican labor model and forces strong links between union leaders, government, and particularly with employers. In a global neoliberal context, these links resulted in a marked decline in unionization rates, collective bargaining and the number of strikes, 0 between the last 18 months, as well as opportunities for simulation, corruption, and business for the leadership. Well, in comparison to Mexico and in Chile, there is formally a greater degree of collective autonomy relative to the state and employer, as well as better conditions for internal democracy. However, it is in its law, Chile grants less associational power than in Mexico. In all, we can observe that in Mexico and Chile, determining working conditions is a markedly unilateral process. But this unilateralism was achieved in the two countries via very different design, as evidenced through the power. Lessons from Latin America, what can we say about the agenda? We found different types of institutional change in Latin America, breakdown in Chile, incremental, with or without transformative effects for countries, altering de facto the level of enforcement, Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, or activation of all rules in Argentina and Brazil. Historical choices in the past are very important, but different designs, as well as different economic and political contexts, can cause authoritarian legacies to function differently, positively or negatively. This results in many differences in union capacities to represent worker interests. If we want to give voice to all waged workers, remember that in Latin America we have informality shops, workers from 80% to 20%, to 30% in Chile. Sorry. Well, if we want to give voice to all waged workers in the new labor market, it is necessary to move towards more democratic forms of union governance in the four countries. This means leaving behind some of those authoritarian legacies that concentrate power either in the state, employers, or union leaderships, and discourages new ways of recruitment of members and collective action to promote better public and corporate policy for all workers. The case of Mexico shows that more institutional power could be less associational power for workers in practice, and that the institutional continuity of ambitious rules could be better explained by the weak enforcement than by institutional inertia. It also showed the importance of informal rules. Brazil and Argentina show how some old rules and institutions may be activated under pressure from unions in a context of pro-workers government, but not only. We can expect a pro-union gradual reform in Chile that removes some authoritarian legacies and the adoption of new rules which could be activated over time by an increasingly organized civil society. The four countries show that the role of the agency is important. However, the power of the formal and informal veto players, the scope of the changes and the points of friction inherited from the past or not, which we need to rethink in order to strengthen associational power in each country, are different. The research agenda that I propose has 4 points. One of them is what aspect or points of friction must be reformed in each country as a condition to enable the opportunity, legitimacy, and effectiveness of collective representation, formal and substantive, and strengthen the associational power. How can the representation be extended in order to include all workers in a context of high heterogeneity in labor markets? What rules and institutions can be activated by the pressure of society to ensure the effective implementation? In the best case, in the sectors and countries where there are growth, there are investment, like in Mexico in automobile industry, we can answer how to manage the trade-off between adopting ambitious rules and the opposition than informal veto players whose interests are threatened. Muchas gracias.